Israeli shelling and airstrikes killed at least 37 people, most of them sheltering in tents outside the southern Gaza city of Rafah overnight on Tuesday.
Brussels Green Week kicks off focusing on water resilience.
Hundreds were forced to evacuate after a volcanic eruption in Iceland.
Russia has stepped up strikes on Ukrainian-held areas in the southern Donetsk region. Over the past 48 hours, at least 2 people died in a shelling on a residential area in Selidove. Ukraine's State Emergency Service claimed that fatalities include a 13-year-old boy whose body was found under the rubble and a 53-year-old man. In the same region, Russian forces also hit the village of Oleksievo-Drushkivka. 7 people were injured and over 100 houses got damaged. The village is around 12 kilometers away from Kramatorsk, one of the key Donetsk cities still in Ukrainian hands. Russia's allegedly carried out the strike with highly explosive aerial bombs. The same weapons were reportedly used on the Berezlavsky district in Kherson, where 3 people were killed and several others were wounded, including French volunteers. Local authorities say Russia is purposely terrorizing the population there, launching attacks even on settlements that have already been severely damaged. They also added that energy facilities keep being targeted.
French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal campaigned on Tuesday in support of the ruling Renaissance Party's candidate for the European Union elections. Attal came to support Valérie Hayer at a rally in Boulogne. During a speech, he warned of the threats Europe faces and stressed the importance of the vote.
Oui, l'Europe est mortelle, car la compétition économique fait rage entre les États-Unis et la Chine et que l'Europe pourrait être distancée si elle ne prend pas son destin en main. Oui, l'Europe est mortelle parce que la guerre frappe à nos portes, car les bombes pleuvent en Ukraine, sur la démocratie, sur nos valeurs, et que nous savons très bien que si la Russie gagne, elle n'en restera pas là. Oui, l'Europe est mortelle, parce qu'elle sait désormais qu'elle ne peut pas compter éternellement sur les États-Unis pour la défendre et qu'elle a besoin de se protéger elle-même.
Valérie Hayer, a French MEP, dedicated her speech to the defense of women's rights.
À l'heure où certains avancent masqués ou pas contre les droits des femmes, je vous le dis à tous, pour nous mesdames, pour nos grands-mères, pour nos mères, pour vos femmes, pour vos sœurs, pour vos filles, notre responsabilité, elle est immense. Il nous reste 10 jours.
Emmanuel Macron, a strong advocate of a strong and united Europe, called for a wake-up call of voters to the rise of the far right. National Rally candidate Jordan Bardella is the favorite in the polls with over 30% of voting intentions, while Macron's Renaissance Party has 16%.
Police carried out a series of simultaneous raids at European Parliament offices in Brussels and Strasbourg as part of a probe into Russian influence. Dutch EU lawmaker Marcel de Graaf confirmed on X that the staffer in question was his parliamentary assistant, Guillaume Pradura. However, he distanced himself from the accusations and said he had had no involvement in any Russian disinformation operation. His aide had been expelled from Marine Le Pen's party in 2019 over an anti-Semitic picture. He also worked as an aide to Maximilian Krah, who's embroiled in an investigation into Chinese espionage. The searches are part of a probe into a Russian influence operation suspected of having paid MEPs to spread pro-Kremlin propaganda at the heart of EU institutions.
Whilst German Chancellor Olaf Scholz had previously been firm on Ukraine not using Western weapons to strike Russian targets, he made a step in the direction of French President Emmanuel Macron on the third and last day of the French leader's historic state visit to Germany. Both leaders put their disagreements aside on Tuesday near Berlin and compromised on the divisive subject of EU defense. The German Chancellor was also more open in terms of military aid to Ukraine, saying Kyiv should be allowed to hit military sites inside Russia, but not other targets. A turning point for Berlin since the Chancellor had been reluctant to let Ukraine strike over the border, fearing it could lead to a direct confrontation with nuclear-armed Moscow.
Sie ist angegriffen und darf sich verteidigen. Da finde ich das schon merkwürdig, wenn einige Diskussionen führen, dass sie sich nicht verteidigen dürfte und Maßnahmen, die dazu geeignet sind, nicht ergreifen dürfte. Das hat es von uns aus, von anderen Ländern Europas, von befreundeten Staaten im internationalen Bereich niemals als Anforderung gegeben und wird es auch nicht geben.
For his part, Emmanuel Macron buried the hatchet with Berlin after the latter initiated a European anti-missile shield project without including Paris. Other differing views, such as economic links to China and the US, have also rocked the Franco-German relationship recently.
Whilst Macron supports greater European independence in defence and to shield the EU economy from unfair Chinese and American competition, Scholz underlines the importance of transatlantic treaties and trade relations with China. This meeting, ahead of the EU vote, marks a turning point in domestic EU politics.
The goal of the historic state visit was to show a united Franco-German front as both leaders face predicted defeats at the hands of far-right parties less than 2 weeks ahead of the EU elections.
For the first time ever in Ireland, immigration is top of the political agenda. New political parties have been formed to address the issue, saying the Irish government is soft on the matter.
I don't think there's anger towards foreign nationals. There's anger towards the policies which are being pushed on to the Irish people. We've always been a welcoming country and we'll always will be, but right now we're being too overwhelmed with people coming in. So the anger is not at the foreign nationals coming in, it's more directed at the government, and that will show.
A recent opinion poll confirmed that the majority of people feel that Irish government policy on the matter amounts to open-door immigration, which is causing problems elsewhere in Irish society.
And I've been out on the campaign trail and we've been to all areas, working class areas, middle class areas, upper class areas, and they all have more or less the same issue. And the reason they have the problem with immigration is because everything else is not fitting into place for them over the last 10 years. For example, longer waiting lists in the hospitals. Their sons and daughters can't get a house in Ireland anymore because it's become unaffordable because of the lack of accommodation. And a lot of this stuff comes back to immigration.
The Irish Freedom Party says there is a growing mood of discontent amongst the Irish electorate.
People are sick of getting up, going to work, paying taxes, seeing this money being handed over to in welfare and free accommodation for people who come from abroad, and yet our own people are emigrating abroad to Australia and to Canada. So there's a financial cost and there's a security cost.
Seasoned observers on Irish politics believe that the new wave of parties that are critical of immigration policy in Ireland are responding to growing public concern.
The anti-immigrant candidates and parties that we've seen grow up in recent months, they are responding, I think, to a public concern on an issue and clearly trying to manipulate it for their own political ends.
No less than 4 political parties that are critical of Ireland's immigration policies are contesting these elections. Whether they win seats or not remains to be seen. However, the very fact that they're contesting these elections at all is proof that a growing number of people feel that the Irish government and the EU Commission are out of touch when it comes to immigration. This is Ken Murray for Euronews in Dublin.
Since becoming Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni's key challenge has been to curb illegal migration. But delivering on the main promise of her political programme has been particularly tough, given the sharp increase in the number of arrivals from Northern Africa since the beginning of her mandate. As she launched Brothers of Italy's electoral campaign, she took credit for changing Europe's approach to migration. If we look at official data for the first 3 months of 2024, the number of arrivals has decreased by more than half compared to the same period last year. Italy's government strongly supported the recent deal between the EU and Tunisia, hailing it as a success that has led to a decrease of almost 60% in the number of departures.
I dati del Ministero degli Interni confermano una riduzione degli sbarchi e degli arrivi in Italia rispetto al 2023. Qual è il ruolo dell'accordo con la Tunisia in questo tipo di situazione? Molto probabilmente è dovuto alla maggiori respingimenti che stiamo osservando su quella area geografica, a un inasprimento delle pene, e questo potrebbe significare una direzione dei flussi migratori verso altri paesi come per esempio la Libia. In termini politici noi abbiamo cercato di porre un rimedio, una specie di tappo a questi flussi migratori in una situazione che sembrerebbe emergenziale ma che invece è di lungo periodo, e quindi bisognerebbe di investimenti di altro tipo, per esempio in welfare.
But the deal, which has been criticized by several humanitarian organizations and MEPs for failing to respect human rights, is not the only piece of legislation to have stirred controversy. The adoption of the EU's Pact on Migration and Asylum has never seen Italy's ruling majority and opposition parties so divided.
Non serve esternalizzare le frontiere, serve di creare percorsi regolari e regolati che consentano alle persone di viaggiare degnamente, arrivare nei nostri sistemi, essere utili a se stesse, alle nostre economie, ai nostri sistemi sociali, e l'Europa ha le regole e la visione politica per farlo.
Crediamo che l'immigrazione sia una delle sfide più importanti. Vogliamo difesa delle frontiere, interazione con i paesi di transito, meccanismi di migrazione legale, rafforzamento delle agenzie europee che si occupano di immigrazione e poi più in generale un piano Marshall per l'Africa che consenta di avviare virtuosi percorsi di sviluppo.
Divisions in the Italian parliament have also emerged following the government's call to develop the outsourcing of asylum policies, such as the protocol signed between Italy and Albania, with this approach gaining more support among member states. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.